for coming, everybody. This is going to be a little different because usually I have a screen behind me and I show you this PowerPoint slide and stuff like that. How many of you guys have been to one of these history talks? Okay, cool. Right on. Cool. Good. All right. I think what we'll do here is I will give you guys a brief rundown once. If we have a whole lot more people come in, I might do it twice, just to explain, as quickly as I can, the origins of shag, because that's what seems to be the most popular question everybody always asks, is where did it come from and when? So I'll do that, and then we'll do questions, right? We'll just kind of treat this as like a discussion. So shag originated, its roots are with tap dance, and to this day, if you watch the old vintage clips, you'll see more clips of, amongst the swing dances, you'll see more clips of shag being done as a tap dance routine than in any of the other swing dances. So it kind of like speaks to that origin. It specifically came from, we believe, with decent amount of evidence, a vaudeville tap step called flea hop, which was just was kind of the best examples I can find of it. Is a triple rhythm. You guys know the difference between single, double, and triple shag? Yeah, cool. It's triple rhythm, just movement with one person doing this with tap shoes on. And then later, I think in the teens, it became a partner dance somehow. People started to do this together, and that became the basic. It was just that, kind of movement, right? Similar to what we do now. So that was the dance. We have to be careful when we're talking about the origins of shag, because the name is one thing and the dance is its own thing. So there were many other dances called shag. In fact, shag wasn't originally called that, the shag that we do. Collegiate shag, sorry. It was called flea hop, or partnered flea hop. And then there were other dances called shag before shag was called shag. And today, of course, as we know, in this event, we've got St. Louis shag and there's heel shag, and some people do single rhythm box shag, and so there's a bunch of them. Anyway, we have to be careful, because if you go back and you try to look up articles, newspaper references, film clips and stuff, and you're looking for shag, if you go deep enough, you're not going to find anything that's actually the dance that we're talking about. You're going to find other stuff. So you have to switch over to flea hop in hopes to find something. I don't know of any other names that it was given in the early days, but usually flea hop is where I find my stuff. The earliest reference I have to flea hop as a dance is from 1925, so that's pretty early. And the best scholarly article / reference point that I can find, I found in New York at a library, and it dated shag and described triple rhythm shag, to 1930. So, and if you guys are interested in any of these articles, you actually want to see them or you want a copy or whatever, just let me know after this and I'll send a copy to you. So the origins of the dance itself were within the African American community. So it took a while for the larger white population to catch on to it. Hence, you'll run into situations where it'll be described, and then later on, white Americans will describe it as though it's a new thing, right, that didn't exist before. So, and there's even one claim from somebody that they started it, and it obviously was not the case, since we had references to it 10 years earlier. So that's, in a nutshell, I guess I should say where. We don't really know where. And vaudeville was a traveling. Do you guys know what vaudeville is? Yeah, if anybody doesn't know, it's like a traveling entertainers. They did all kinds of stuff. Tap dance routines, singing, skits, animal tricks. Dogs do stuff through hoops and stuff. Anyway, so there were specific black vaudeville circuits and white vaudeville circuits, and it's through the black vaudeville circuit that this dance arose. That's our best understanding. So, I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Oh, collegiate shag, I should say this too. With respect to the difficulty with the naming practices of this stuff, we call it collegiate shag now. Some people called it collegiate shag back then, but most people just called it shag. And there were, 4 different principal rhythms that you could do. It just depended upon what part of the country you were you were in. So we have to be careful with that collegiate term too. There were other dances called collegiate this, collegiate that, collegiate foxtrot, collegiate Charleston, collegiate rumba even. And there was a dance called the collegiate, which had nothing to do with collegiate shag. So it's a very, very different step. The origins of the name shag, or the word shag, or not word shag, but the use of it as a name for a dance, probably goes back to 1928 in North Carolina to this guy named Lewis Phillip Hall. But that's a guy who named a dance that he created with his partner and named it shag. And then later at some point, flea hop took on that name of shag. So, and then later in New York, you start to see our shag being called collegiate shag. Because little known fact, heel shag, you guys know what heel shag is? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, it was called collegiate shag in the two articles, the only two articles we have about that dance. It's called collegiate shag. It was a person who knew the dance that ran into Lance Benishek, who told them that it was called heel shag, and we adopted that instead to prevent confusion. So, yeah. All right, I think that covers it. So questions? Yes. Oh yeah, right. I'm Ryan Martin, and I'm a shag nerd. Yeah, so I got real into this stuff many years ago, and yeah, started studying about it. And how many of you guys are familiar with the film Rebirth of Shag? Wow. Okay, that's way fewer than I thought. All right, so I made a film, a feature-length, 2-hour, bunch of nerd business about shag, so collegiate shag, and discussed it at length and stuff. I drove around the country and found as many old timers as I could, and I have one serious regret about this. I wish I had tried harder to find black folks who knew shag and did it. It would have been more difficult anyway had I been able to find anybody, because they were doing it generally about 5 to 10 years earlier than white folks were. So it would have been pretty old if I had found somebody. But I still have hope that we can find a lot more information, and hopefully some written interview or something like that with somebody at some point. So yeah. So yep, I'm Ryan Martin, and yeah. Any yes? Uh-huh. Right. I don't exactly know. You guys know who Lance Benishek is? For those of you who don't, he was a very eccentric man who was he just studied vernacular dances like crazy. He just had piles of VHS tapes and articles and stuff in his little apartment, and he was a bit of a hermit, but he knew a whole lot about shag. And my understanding of it, I just couldn't have developed this, sort of this whole history. I don't know. I couldn't have put all this together if it weren't for him. So he thinks, or mentioned that they would do it, like the vaudeville dancers would do that, just on the side, like horsing around and stuff. And I know that sometimes Jean Foreman, she was a tap dancer who also did shag and was from the South. She said she would do it after, like after her shows or whatever. She, like when the lights went down or whatever, and it was just the regular evening, we got the band and, that kind of stuff, that they would just kind of dance it. So I think it was probably just an organic thing, they just started doing it. Like, what do we do? Oh, let's just do that little thing. And kind of like the way the shim sham became, a line dance, it was originally a tap routine. Yeah, so good question. Yeah. I also think, yes. What's that? Heel shag? Oh, we don't know very much about it. Lance ran into somebody who knew it. He saw Lance and someone doing it in California. He told me. Yeah, Do you know what it looks like? Okay, it's gonna look kind of dorky. Me been doing it by myself, but it's like this, triple step, and the articles we have for it, I think, are from the 50s. So people who do it these days, which there's not many, will usually do it to more like early rock and roll or R&B. So it's really fun. It works incredibly well for music from, generally speaking, from the 1950s. It's danceable really well. Like, yeah, same way that like St. Louis shag sometimes feels really good to that same kind of music. And boogie woogie, yeah. But yeah, cool. Did that answer the question? Okay, cool. Yes. Right, which is, yeah, totally unique. Yeah. So I think we both start on our left, or I can't remember. But yeah, but it kicks on the 2, just like collegiate shag, which is kind of interesting. So yeah. I think St. Louis kicks on 1 and 3, right? You guys would know better than me. I am no St. Louis shag expert. Anyway. Yeah, 5. Okay. Yes. Well, it meant a lot of things. It was, generally speaking, it meant this is what the college kids are into. This is the style of dance, fill in the blank, rumba or Charleston or whatever, that the college kids do, and generally meant that there were more kicks or stomps, more wild footwork in the dance. It might be faster, done to faster music, which is something that is of African-American origins. Dancing like that was generally the way that blacks were more expressive with their dance. The white high school kids and college kids would see that and be like, well, that's more fun. We want to do that. So, yeah, there's almost 2 stories to it. There's a really interesting and unfortunate article where this very proper British woman, I think, I'm not sure, she might have been American, but she was presenting the British system of dance in New York at some dance congress thing that they had. Because back then you had dance masters. You had to sort of earn your place as a dance instructor, amongst people who were in the ballroom dance, what we think of as ballroom dance world. And she was speaking at one of these things and trying to convince Americans to adopt the British system. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I think it was less vernacular, just more like ballroom type dancing. And she said that collegiate dances, and said this as though it was just a fact that everybody kind of knew, they were dance masters or whatever, like collegiate dances were of African-American origin. So, in fact, I should just read it to you guys, because it's very telling. See if I can find it. Lucille Stoddart was her name. Through groups like the Dancing Teachers Congress, this is a quotation, the most elite dance teachers worked to distance themselves from the least. The Congress met in New York City in 1932. These dance instructors maligned dance styles that were coded Black and American in order to create a demand for instruction in styles coded white and British. Miss Lucille Stoddart, chairman of the Congress, characterized the origins of popular dances as Black and therefore as unacceptable unless modified. All the popular ballroom dances of the moment, the shag, the shuffle, and the Lindy Hop, are done to foxtrot music and are collegiate in style. Collegiate dancing is the outgrowth of Negro dancing, just as popular ballroom music is based primarily on Negro rhythm. Lucille hoped that the Congress would succeed in promoting an alternative to collegiate dancing, which itself was a stultified form of dances which originated in African American communities. The proposed alternative, which was taught at the Congress, was the British system. So, yeah. Yeah, but generally speaking, people understood the term collegiate to mean like, this is what the college kids do. But yeah, it's deeper than that, so. All right. Other questions? Yes. Right. So we've gotten to where, and by this I mean like people who consider themselves to be preservationists and real historians and stuff like that, of this kind of stuff. We've gotten to where we look for certain things, you know, like one of the big ones is, are they actually dancing to the music that's being played? Because sometimes they would record just the dancing and then they would add the soundtrack later and it wouldn't match up, you know? And what is it? Like there's one clip that I really like of the World's Fair, and it's somebody filming, you know, the band and the dancers right there together. So and you see them dancing and being musical and everything. So it's, it's legit then. But then you've got other cases like the Arthur or the Artie Shaw clip, you know, where they're going around. It's sort of overlaid, you know, on top of the musicians. You see them in one layer, and then behind it you see the dancers dancing, and you can tell that they were probably dancing to that same song because they're dancing at the same speed. But you can tell that they were hitting certain things in the music, but the music was at a different spot, you know. One of these days I want to go and like line them back up again, you know, so I can see it, you know. But yeah, so yeah, there's that. Also, you know, there'll be every now and then like a newsreel that will talk about, like, there's this one, these kids in New Jersey were protesting their, a gym teacher was getting fired or something like that. And so they were all standing outside. So, you know that stuff's legit, you know? Yeah. And I mean, it just looks like social dancing, the good stuff, the stuff that's legit. It looks like they're just they're not like doing this whole elaborate routine or silly stuff like the Blondie Meets the Boss clip and stuff like that. I wish I could show you guys these clips. But yeah, does that answer the question? Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So could you say that last part again about everybody doing different styles? Yes. They weren't all doing the same thing? So, yeah. Which is contrast with today. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Right. I think that there was a lot more individual style to the dancing, because you've got to remember, people weren't going to these big workshops, you know, and they weren't. I mean, they might, in a sense, kind of idolize their favorite dancer. For tap dancers, they would know, okay, well, that's so and so, you know. But you weren't going to see shag. Sometimes we have Lindy Hop in clips, you know, like actual films. It's like a special scene just for Lindy Hop, like Hell's a Poppin'. But like, it's not like a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers routine, you know. So, yeah, they didn't have the workshops, and I think that maybe the way that we learn now, instead of just on the dance floor like they did, was, it makes it so that we're more likely to imitate those that are teaching us instead of trying to develop our own style. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I have to be careful because when I prepare for these things, I give myself words because I'm not actually a very good speaker at all. So I didn't think of that. I just kind of feel like we should take cue from the old timers, you know, and like, because they would tell you that we all wanted to look unique, you know, like we wanted to each have our own individual style. If people will search for the line, you and I were talking about this earlier, the line between what is technique and what's sort of essential to the dance, what is at its core, if we can get everybody to think about this, and then what is not, what's just style, right? Like adding style to your dancing, And those things are very different, and you can continue to add your own pieces to the dance without destroying what the dance is if you know this, and I think if more people were cognizant of that, we would end up with a lot more individual personal looks, and it would be more like the Harvest Moon ball clip where you see all these guys just doing completely different. I mean, some of the shag dancers had different basics, not rhythmically they weren't different, pulse-wise they weren't different, frame they weren't different, but the feet did very different things, so. Yes. Yeah, we got I don't know how to put this. But yeah. Yeah, I feel like we're starting to open ourselves up to including more people as authorities in the dance, right? As time goes on, we're getting better about that rather than just letting the old guard, kind of including myself, like continue to rule things and dictate how stuff is going to be. You've got to have different perspectives, and yeah, we definitely need more people that are going to help us to understand where that line is between style and technique, or core elements, kind of a thing. That's super important. I don't really know how else to put it other than that, but we were talking about that too, weren't we? Yeah. It's particularly folks from the Black community we've got to find. I mean, it's their heritage after all, Yeah. And yes. Say that again? Geography. Oh, okay. Shag was all over the whole United States. Yeah, it was very, very popular. Lance claimed that, interestingly enough, because Lindy Hop is sort of like our standard now, and it's like our main swing dance, right? Lance believed, and I think he might have been right, that shag was actually more popular, like across the country, than Lindy Hop became, even. But maybe not now, but yeah. Yeah, it was just really, really, it was all over the place. I mean, there's tons of newspaper articles about it and stuff like that most of the time. The writers saying how hyperactive it was, and how fast, and yeah, that kind of thing, but which is humorous. Apparently the established dance world did not like shag very much. But yeah. But depending upon where you were, you might have a completely different style, from somewhere else. So like Southern California, for instance, had a style of shag called jig trot, or has, I guess, because it's still alive. And that was before the rhythm and style that we're kind of all familiar with, that we call collegiate shag, was before that one made its way to LA. So they already had a shag, and they didn't call it shag. They called it jig trot, and it was 8 count. And then the story goes, Connie Weidel moved to LA, to Southern California, and introduced people to the style of shag that he had learned from some Peabody dancers from New York. This is how the story goes. I don't have a ton of stuff to back that up, but yeah, I've heard it from a lot of people. So they ended up with 2 different styles of shag, which they didn't even call both shags, although people seem to be aware of that. But yeah, so, yep. Some people, Peter's not here, is he? Some people think that dance then became Balboa. Some people. He's going to kill me if he knows I said that. Anyway, yeah. Yep. But next question. No? Yes. Uh-huh. Right. It did. Yeah, it did, in small measure. I mean, it wasn't a huge deal. What I see when I watch the old vintage clips, because there's some that are, that are British, and there's some that are German and stuff like that. I see that when they made it over, they morphed a bit and changed. So it's not always easy to determine whether or not, because we look for that characteristic sort of pulse and, like look of shag, arm in the air maybe, but yeah. And I remember we have one clip that's got some shag that Peter gave me. It was an Australian clip. There's like a split second of clearly single shag being done somewhere. So someone took it, from Georgia or something like that and brought it with them while they were, overseas, and dropped that off. So, yeah. But it's interesting the way that it changes when you get to other countries. And some of them survived, like Boogie Woogie, and some of them did not. So, yeah. Jerron. How that functioned? Oh, yeah? Maybe so. I mean, see, I don't know a whole lot about Boogie Woogie's history, but I heard that the GIs were doing something in the early 50s or something like that during the German occupation, when American GIs were posted there after World War II, and that the style of dancing that they were doing, which was sort of derivative of Lindy Hop, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here. If anybody knows the real story, let me know, or if this is correct. Then that folks that were there and learned from the GIs just kept it, and then it kind of became its own thing over time. And now it's different enough that I had a hell of a time figuring out how to do that. That whole slide your foot thing to the side just threw me off. But I don't know exactly. Can you ask the question with different words?
Just kind of how the word of shag overseas, whether kind of not it had a video.
You mean like film clips? Yeah. And you're talking about in the 30s, right? Okay. Yeah. I think that probably that and the GIs going overseas, I think would have been a way that it would have spread. And whether it stuck or not, I have no idea. Because we have like seriously few clips of shag being done overseas. Maybe one from this country, one from that country. And sometimes it's like, I'm not even sure if that's shag. They're pulsing like shag. But film clips, you got to remember that, one of the reasons why swing dancing kind of made a comeback in mass, the mass number of people who do Lindy Hop now is because the VCR was invented and became commonplace, right? So that you could watch it over and over again. But back then, it was like you go to the theater and you see a film, or, like Whitey's Lindy Hoppers would be, hired, at the big theaters when there's like a opening or whatever to dance a little bit before the show, and you watch that, and then you've got to go back home and like try to do what you saw, and like you can imagine kids maybe were doing like triple rhythm shag or something, and then somebody saw that and went home to do it, and they ended up with double rhythm because they didn't notice that there were 3 slows and they got rid of one, something like that. So I imagine a lot of that probably happened overseas, but I don't think it stuck. And I say that because I don't find any newspaper articles or anything that really mention a whole lot of it, and maybe my British friends can find some, but yeah, I can't seem to find any that mention that stuff. And the film clips are really rare. I think it was kind of like it happened for a little while, and then as far as shag goes, and then it was gone, and certain things like Boogie Woogie survived. Are there any other dances here in Europe that are like Boogie Woogie that were like done to swing or swing type music that have that same sort of story? Do you guys know of any? No? Okay. Just curious. Does that actually answer the question, Ron? Okay. Yeah. Good questions. Anybody? Yes? Right. Yeah, this is a really good question. Okay, so you got to be careful when we talk about rhythm, and specifically I'll even say in the shag context, because I can't speak for the whole dance world in general. Like tap talks about stuff slightly different from the way swing dancers do. But a rhythm in a dance like shag would be different rhythmic unit footwork. I don't know how else to describe it. Like your footwork timing, you have two different types of timing or three different types of timing. You know, like the heel shag, for instance, right? Like I do a heel ball change, right? Heel ball change, and then a step and a hold, then a triple step. It's like, that's like four different, you know, little pieces. If you repeat something, on the other hand, you know, like we do with skates or collegiate kicks or any of that kind of stuff, you're repeating the same footwork over and over again. That's what we call subrhythmic elements. So as far as subrhythmic go, I think every swing dance had them, and shag was definitely no exception. It had a ton of them, and those were very prominent. So if you mean switching rhythms in that sense, for sure. If you mean switching between like single shag and double shag, there was only one that we've got documented that did that like normally. I'm sure somebody somewhere was, but and that would be triple and single shag would switch between each other. And that's the only one we really know of. Yeah. So that's a really interesting topic, though. There's a lot of discussion about that stuff, switching between rhythms. For me and my friends, it was like this challenge. You're like, oh, we can do this. You know, like, oh, this will be so cool. We can do it. And then we did it, and we're kind of like, there's all these subrhythmic moves we can do too, like hit the music just as well. I don't know why we're complicating things so much. And then eventually, for me, I began to realize I could loosen up a bit and leave more room for my partner to do her own styling and stuff, and her own footwork timing even in certain contexts, and I could too. And so I just gave up on that project. Yeah, because in order to do it, you have to lead like every step, you know, or have like a wink, wink, kind of like we're switching now, you know. But that's a good question. Yes. Say that again. The shag is what? Say. No, there was a shag that was a box step. Yeah, but shag itself. Where is the? Say that again. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Tap dance. Yeah, that would be its parent. Yeah, you could. I mean, if you like really diced it up, I guess you might say flea hop. But flea hop is essentially the same thing that we do today. Just like a very stripped down version of it. Yeah. So, yep. Yeah. I thought you guys were going to ask me way like more controversial questions. So don't hold back. I mean, like if you got some, you're like, I know this is going to get everybody upset. You know, it's okay. You know, provided that we're all civil and nice to each other. Yes. Yeah. That is a really good question I do not know an answer to. Like, I don't. Yeah. I mean, social dance in general has a lead and follow element to it. So if they were doing it and connecting in some way, at some point they would have to like start to designate. I think that has more to do with general body weight of individuals, more so than anything else, you know? Because I mean, now it's like, we're like, we don't need to do that. You know, we've got all these techniques and stuff for our connection and stuff like that. We can lighten it to where we need it so that body weight doesn't matter as much, you know? But back then, just people dancing. I mean, these, like we said, these guys didn't learn in workshops and stuff. So unless they were going to learn what Lucille Stoddard was teaching, you know? So yeah, I imagine that's why. But yes. Right. Yeah. So that's an interesting topic. Yeah. So the same time that it became popular here was pretty much the same time it became more popular in the U.S. And that probably, I mean, so I think things were building. You know, there was a handful of nerds in the U.S., and I was one of them, you know, who were really into shag and super dedicated to it. And every now and then there'd be like an event, and it might have a second year, but it was usually like 50 people max, you know, that was about shag, you know. And then that would die out, and, you know, we would just kind of do our thing and try to show up at Balboa or Lindy events and dance and stuff. And then it started to gain some steam. I released the film, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when I released it. Yeah, 2012, I think. Yeah, and that helped a little bit, you know. People started to, Facebook helped because we started forming these groups, you know. Collegiate Shag UK is actually pretty old, you know. And we made the Shag community site, which used to be called Shag Connection. We made that. Yeah, and sort of like shared all of our little nerdy bits. And then that Steven and Shanzi video came out, which became YouTube's most popular swing dance video for the year 2013. And that just, everything exploded then. But I think leading up to that, it was the people who were serious about shag who started to look toward Camp Hollywood as being sort of like mile marker or whatever, like the deciding factor, you know, for shag and where it is and all this kind of stuff. Because it was the only event that had a shag contest since the 90s, you know, that continued to go on. So we were all looking at that, you know, and Steve and Fancy won like 2012, I think, and then 2013, yeah, I think, yeah, and then that video came out from Rock That Swing, and then just everything exploded, you know. Yeah, it's so charismatic, you know. People couldn't help but like it. And you guys had Boogie Woogie, 6 count, fast-paced, fancy footwork dance, and so it was a natural fit. You know, we were still having a fight with Lindy Hoppers back in the U.S. who were like telling us it was a clown dance, you know. So, yeah, but yeah, I'm glad that happened, you know. Yeah. And then it's going through all the same sort of like changes that each of the dances goes through, you know, or we start to pay attention to technique, and then, you know, things get kind of weird, and then we go back to the original, you know, like the roots and try to do it more like that. Yeah. So it's finding its way. Yes. Right. Yeah, I think it has caused a lot of misconceptions about the dance. Did you guys hear what he said? Okay, so he was asking whether or not the sort of like the precedent with the film clips that we have. You know, we have more than you'd probably think. I don't know if you guys look into this stuff at all, but there's a decent number of shag clips. Whereas Balboa, it's like there's almost nothing. You know, we've got the Bobby McGee stuff, but that was like the 70s and 80s, you know, and like actual clips from the back in the day. It's really, really hard to find them. Shag, we've got a decent amount. Lindy Hop, of course, wins the day. There's tons of those, probably because of Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. But he's wanting to know if those might have had an influence on how we perceive of the dance, and even how we make clips today, and like who gets noticed. And I absolutely think so. Yeah. There have been many times when folks that I'm talking to about this stuff either assume, infer, or just straight up say that shag is a white dance, you know, which is just loaded with problems already. You know, like just saying that it's a white dance or a black dance or whatever is problematic. To say it's originated with so-and-so, or came out of a community, of people, that's one thing. But if you say it's a white dance or a black dance, then that seems to imply that, it's only for these people and not these people. I think that the film clips from back then definitely give people the wrong impression, And so, yeah, though this is ultimately comes from the black community and grew out of that with all the values that African Americans have with their dancing and their arts in general. And that's something that's really missing today, and yeah, I'm glad that Jaron's here. I am, dude. It's like, we both live around Dallas and talk about this stuff a lot. So, there is maybe 6, 7, 8, maybe 8 clips with blacks doing shag that we have so far. Probably 4 of those are like a split second. There's just like a little bit of it, and it might be mixed into another dance, and might not even actually be shag. I don't know, depending on what they thought of it. So it makes it tough because, as Jaron was pointing out, blacks didn't get on film as often as whites. In fact, I'm going to read this article because this just like cuts to the chase. This is quite daring, and I'm really glad that we found it. From the Afro-American, June 14th, 1941. I know many of you have read this before. Just in case you hadn't heard about the dance situation, the Black Bottom, Charleston, Shag, Lindy Hop, Susie Q, Truckin', and Peckin', all of which we know came from the black community. The one sort of that was misunderstood the most was the shag, because we have all these film clips of white kids, a lot of times very preppy looking white kids doing shag, When Hollywood needs a bunch of kids to knock themselves out doing the Lindy or some such thing, a group of white kids are called in. When a Broadway show needs ensemble dancing of the terrific modern tempo, it hires only whites to do it. But most of the steps are directly imported from Harlem, Chicago's South Side, Birmingham's 17th Street, or Central Avenue in Los Angeles. So, that just straight up, And that quotation there just like speaks to the problem, and that was 1941, we're still dealing with this. So, yeah. Yeah. We had Hot Rhythm had it was like a special online thing during the pandemic where we discussed this kind of stuff, and several black shag dancers spoke about a lot of this and tried to explain, why this stuff is important, and we talked a lot about what African American values are in the arts, and dance and stuff like that, and it's stuff that's kind of missing sometimes, like. The best example I can think of, and if you think of something, let me know, because, I can't remember everything. My memory's terrible. But when we do these dances, choreography, routines, performances, they're a lot of fun, but that's not the heart of it, It's about improvisation and partnership, being, sort of like an aesthetic triangle. And it's like you and the music and your partner all together, doing this thing. It's improvisation is like a key aspect of it. It's a very African dance value that I think folks try to treat it sometimes, especially when they're just coming into the dance, like it's a ballroom dance, just maybe a little bit more rebellious one or something, or cooler, but yeah. Another thing is there's a lot of I hear this a lot. Zach in particular is very sticky about this one. So it's okay to say to a certain extent that there's a right and a wrong way to do something. But a lot of times there are several right ways to do it and a few wrong ways. And that several is prominent enough or numerous enough that it almost doesn't make sense to say, there's a proper way, and sticking to this very narrow conception of what a dance is. Again, it's important not to destroy the dance. You want to understand the fundamental bits to it. If you're kicking on 1 and 3 in shag, a lot with a lot of your moves, then you're not. That's Jaron's example, by the way. You're not sticking to the dance. You're letting it venture off into something else, and that can come close to happening. I mean, in some cases it's okay. We've got contemporary ballet, right? It's like ballet, and then there's contemporary ballet. We've got West Coast, which is no longer Lindy Hop. And you hope that you don't lose the original. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be a shame if we didn't have original ballet, if that wasn't still a thing, or if we didn't have Lindy Hop. If like West Coast just was where Lindy Hop went. And that'd be awful. I mean, no offense to Westies, but I just think it would be terrible. Anyway. Is there any West Coast here in Europe? Do people do that here? No? They do? Yeah, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, right, gotcha. All right. Yes?
Is there a perfect example of
This is not a history question. I like 220, but maybe I'm getting older now, so maybe like 210, 200. So, to me, anyway. John, did I do that last subject justice? Is that probably not, but did I come close? Okay.
I think part of me always wants to get some perspectives that have expression, but it feels a little different when we allow people to have certain perspectives.
All right.
Solidifying to the point where like you can do these few things. If we're solidifying it to the point where you can do these few things, and then other people are trying to like expand on that, but we don't allow them to because they aren't influential or they're not part of the people that we've already kind of said, these are the people that can do this. It creates kind of a gap. It can drive people out and make people wonder whether or not the dance is even for them, even if it is part of their own culture or whatever.
If they don't fit the model that's been created, right?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's difficult for me to speak from that point of view. It's like I have to, yeah. Somebody had their hand up before I started. Yes.
Is there any history behind the shag finger?
Any what?
The shag finger?
Oh,
Is there any story? Why?
I don't know, but I think it was probably adopted from trucking, which is a very simple dance step, where they did this, which was an imitation of waiters spinning trays on their finger. So yeah. Any other? Sid, did you have a question? Did you have your hand raised?
No.
Okay.
I was wondering about if you could say anything about St. Louis shag.
St. Louis, yeah. I don't know a lot about it. I've talked to Christian about it on a couple of occasions, and he says it came from the Charleston, which that along with heel shag, and then these other shags that existed before collegiate shag and didn't survive, like what I call Lumina shag, because it came from this one dance pavilion called Lumina Ballroom. Along with that sort of indicates that shag probably meant to young dancers the energetic dance or something like that, the wild dance or something. Some people think that the word shag was originally used to mean like a dance, like an event, right? You're going to a shag, and then gradually the dances that were done at these shags were called shag. So, yeah. Did I veer off from your question?
No, I mean it was just about St. Louis. Although I was also interested, but this is veering off.
The St. Louis shag thing. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about like the animal dances.
Right.
They were very popular in that kind of early period. But
Yep.
You don't hear so much. I mean, obviously you've got the foxtrot, the kind of turkey trot, and
I think they
kangaroo,
all.
those
Yeah.
strange dances.
I think they all took pieces of that. I think shag took some turkey trot, and it took the bunny hop from Charleston, and Charleston probably took it from animal dances, and that kind of stuff. But yeah. Yeah, as far as St. Louis shag goes, Christian says it was just a step, which, I mean, a lot of these things start like that. It was like a step you would throw into, I guess, your St. Louis jitterbug, and yeah, then we've taken it, and there's a couple of couples doing this with heel shag too, where you take it and you just sort of expand on it. You take that core idea and then work with it, which is totally legit, when you think about it, because every single one of the old timers that I interviewed would hyper focus on the basic shag step and then talk a little bit about other stuff, And I think that's where the spirit of that particular dance comes, in the movement sense, the spirit of that dance comes from. Yeah. But yeah. It is funny how it's not at all related to, Carolina shag is really not, just a completely different thing. Which, if y'all didn't know, it came from, there was Big Apple, right, which was like a call and response dance, undeniably African-American, done in a circle, right? And a piece of that was taken and turned into Little Apple. I'm not sure who started that, which then turned into Carolina Jitterbug, which was, I think, an 8-count dance or something like that. And then Carolina shag evolved from that, but dropped 2 steps. So they ended up being 6-count dance that looks like West Coast. It's done to a particular kind of R&B. It's like, well, yeah. But so I guess distantly it did originate from, some swing stuff. But yeah, by the time it became really popular, it was like the 50s, and kids were dancing to completely different music. So yeah, St. Louis shag, I don't know. I just know that Christian has clips, or he learned from somebody whose style, I think he's still around. I can't remember his name, but who danced it kind of in the early 50s, I think. If any of you guys know more, you can tell me. Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't know, to me, I see that stuff and it just fits really well with that type of music, but, yes. Sure. I think that's like a natural thing that we all do. I went through a period where I was dancing shag. I didn't tell you this, but I was kind of embarrassed of it. But I would dance collegiate shag to hip hop, and after a while I'm like, okay, I see where this is, because some hip hop is polyrhythmic, and shag is polyrhythmic dance. So I thought, I want to see what happens when you put 2 polyrhythmic things together, and it was fun, but I had to go back to the feel of it wasn't the same. It's like there's a reason why kids started moving the way they did. You see that common thread between Balboa, shag, Lindy, Charleston. All these dances have some similarities that are unmistakable, because that's the way we want to move our bodies to the music. And to an extent also it had to do, I'm sure, with the way that people were just moving and what they thought of dance, what dance was like. Partner dancing, back in 1930s and stuff. I'm sure that had an influence too. So if somebody were to be exposed, in another world, in another possible world on Earth, if swing music happened to come out now, swing dancing might look a bit different, but I think in many ways it would look the same. I think so. Yeah. In fact, I think it's good to experiment with that kind of stuff, because if you don't have as much of an awareness or familiarity with why we dance it to swing music, and I think it could also, like you said, I think like you were inferring, that it can give you new ideas, Yeah. But we want to be careful, because that was the thing I was saying about West Coast earlier. It was like, now West Coast, they don't even, hence I call it West Coast. I don't drop the swing part. They shouldn't even keep the swing in the name. It's not dance to swing music, Anyway. Sorry.
Sorry, just another geography question. When shag was big in North America. I just wondered if it penetrated at all South America.
I know nothing about that. Maybe I should, you know. I would have thought that if that happened, you know, that I would have heard about it more, you know.
You get the
Don't-
impression it's very north or south, but not the.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking like, if it's interesting because flea hop, the step, managed to make its way into rumba or something like that. And there is one clip from Ebony magazine in 1961 that says that I didn't, where did I put it? I don't know how to pronounce this dance, but it sounds Latin. Pachanga. Yeah, that shag was where pachanga came from. I'm like, I don't know what pachanga is, but yeah. You talking about today?
Well, I'm saying back, like, so if the U.S. has like places like Texas and stuff like that that have a predominant group of people that have family back in South America, if they took the dance away from them.
Right. Yeah. That totally. This makes me want to look harder because I've never, yeah. I guess in my mind I was thinking Latin dance, you know, but yeah, both of those Latin dances were very popular in the U.S. in the 30s, so I have to look into that. I'm just surprised some of my friends from South America who are into shag, who I chat with occasionally online, haven't, you know, I haven't heard anything about it. So, yeah, really good question. All right, let me see what we got time here. Okay, so I think we're almost done here. I think we started about 8:40, and it's like, right? 5 more minutes? Okay, cool. So, I can't think of anything else. Yes. Oh, right, yeah. Birdie in a cage. That's a good question, too. That may be one of those things that, like, it occurs to me later, you know. I know that I had heard from Lance, I haven't seen any documentation of this, that the arm in the air was it was mocking ballroom dancers, basically. So it was like a rebellious teenager thing to do. And chugs and a lot of the other pieces of the dance they're directly translated from tap. Chugs are like back chugs in tap. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I can't think of it. Yeah, if I think of something, I'll let you know. Yeah.
I wonder if like certain things that happen because of how culture was back in the day.
Right.
How they, like, for instance, some tap routines had two people, and so that they wouldn't allow more than one tap routine on stage, right? So like, if things like that, like cultural things that made it so they had to do partner things.
Right.
That didn't involve this. I wonder if that's kind of how it goes. Or if you really would go back to like African dances in Africa.
Yeah.
How those transform to other things that we do now that they where they come back around up to
Yeah.
that level of stretch.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it's that much of a stretch because there is a dance, a wild-looking dance as far as like the speed of it in West Africa. I'm sure some of you guys have seen that clips. Yeah, where it's just solo though, you know. But yeah, It's crazy fast. Their heads don't move at all. And I can't remember the name of it. Yeah. Yeah, yep. Totally. Yeah, hip hop's direct descendant of Charleston. And you'd never think it, but it totally is. You can see it if you think about it, yeah. All right, so I think that is all we've got. Maybe one more question? Yeah, no? No, okay. Okay, we're good. Yeah. All righty. Thanks for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Egley, for having me. And Arnis, wherever he is. And yeah, this was great. All righty.
Thank you.